The forest is quiet at night. Too quiet. If you've ever walked a lonely trail after dark, you know the silence feels heavy, like the trees themselves are listening. Two hikers discovered this silence one autumn evening. But what they heard inside that silence was something no one should ever hear. It came from a hollow tree, a tree that should have been empty, but wasn't. Pause, faint, broken whisper. Let me out. Mark and Daniel were experienced hikers. They'd spent years exploring the Appalachian trails, chasing waterfalls and caves, looking for places untouched by people. That day, they left the path. Their boots crunched through leaves as the sun began to set. The air turned colder, the forest darker. And then, they saw it. A massive, ancient tree, bigger than any they'd ever seen. Its trunk was hollowed out, wide enough for a person to crawl inside. The opening gaped like a mouth. Daniel laughed nervously. Man, that thing looks alive. Mark shone his flashlight into the hollow. It went deep, too deep. The beam just vanished into blackness. As a joke, Daniel leaned forward and shouted into the tree. Hello. They waited for the echo. But the sound that came back wasn't his voice. It was faint, broken, a whisper that didn't belong to either of them. Let me out. Mark's light trembled in his hand. Did you hear that? Daniel laughed, trying to sound brave. It's just the echo. But his face was pale. They stepped back. The forest around them had gone completely silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. And then the whisper came again. Clearer, stronger. Let me out. Mark grabbed Daniel's arm. We need to go. Now. But Daniel was staring into the hollow, his eyes wide. His lips were moving as if he was answering the voice. Mark shook him. Stop it. Let's leave. But Daniel didn't move. He stepped closer to the hollow, as if pulled by something unseen. The air grew colder. Mark could see his breath. The smell of rot and soil filled the air. The shadows inside the hollow began to shift. Like something was moving in there. Mark screamed at his friend. Finally, Daniel blinked, snapped out of it, and stumbled back. They ran. Neither of them looked back at the tree. For days, Daniel was not himself. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He kept whispering the same words under his breath. Let me out. Let me out. One night, Mark woke up to find Daniel's bed empty. His backpack was gone. His boots were gone. Mark searched the forest for hours, calling his friend's name. But Daniel never returned. The only thing they found weeks later was his backpack, leaning neatly against the hollow tree. Months passed. Mark tried to forget, but he couldn't. The sound of that whisper haunted him. One evening, he returned to the trail. Alone. The tree was still there, hollow, waiting. He took a deep breath and leaned close. His flashlight shook in his hand. Daniel? He whispered. The answer came immediately. Not faint, not broken, but clear. Let me out. And this time, it was Daniel's voice. The cabin was not on any map. It stood deep in the forest, hidden by tall pines and thick fog. The door was open, as if waiting for someone to walk inside. And on the shelf was a radio, old, rusted, still humming with static. A group of campers found it by mistake. They had taken a wrong trail, the sun was going down, and they were desperate for shelter. The cabin smelled of rot and damp wood. The floor was covered in dust. No furniture, no signs of life, except for the radio. It was the only thing in the entire cabin that looked untouched by time. One of the campers turned the knob. At first, just static. But then, voices. They froze. The sound wasn't music. It wasn't news. It was screaming, muffled, distorted, like dozens of people crying for help all at once. The campers stared at each other, pale, silent. One girl whispered, "Turn it off." But another boy shook his head. He swore he heard his father's voice. The same father who had died years ago. The more they tuned the radio, the worse it became. Static, screams, laughter, whispers. The cabin walls seemed to shake with the noise. One camper pulled out his phone. He pressed record, capturing the sound. When they played it back, the recording was silent, completely empty. Terrified, they threw the phone down. But the radio kept going, louder and louder, until it sounded like something was in the room with them. The shadows on the walls began to move, twisting and bending even though there was no light. The campers ran out of the cabin, leaving the radio behind. The next morning, they tried to find the cabin again. But no matter how far they searched, the trail was gone. The cabin had vanished. Only the boy who recorded the sound had proof. That night, when he listened to his phone again, something new had appeared. A single whisper, just one voice, calling his name. Weeks later, he disappeared. His friends searched the forest but never found him. And then, one day, hikers claimed they discovered a cabin deep in the woods. Inside, the dust was thick. The shelves were empty, except for one thing, an old radio. And when they turned it on, the first voice they heard was his. It was midnight, and the crying had already begun. The sound was soft at first, like a woman weeping under the old bridge. The car headlights hit the rusted steel, the broken wood, the black water below. 4 teenagers sat inside, frozen. One whispered, "Do you hear that?" And then the crying grew louder, closer. They had come here for fun. Everyone in town knew the legend of the crying bridge. They said if you stop your car at midnight, you will hear her, the woman who never left the river. At first, they thought it was just a story. But now, the voice was real. It sounded like she was kneeling right beside the car, begging, softly, for help. The driver tried to laugh it off, but his hands were shaking. The girl in the back seat covered her ears. And still, the crying went on. Finally, one boy shouted, "It's fake. Someone's hiding down there." He opened the door. The crying stopped. For a moment, there was silence. And then, they heard footsteps. Wet, dragging footsteps, slowly moving around the car. The driver locked the doors. No one spoke. They just listened as the sound circled them. Step, step, step. The footsteps stopped at the back of the car. And then, scratch. Something scraped against the glass. The girl screamed. The driver turned the key. The engine coughed, but didn't start. The crying came back. Louder now, angry. It filled the night, shaking the windows. Finally, the engine roared alive. The headlights lit up the bridge, and they saw them. Handprints on every window. Wet, black handprints sliding down the glass. But the fingers were too long, too thin, not human. The driver slammed the car into gear. Tires squealed on the broken road. The crying followed them as they raced away. fading only when the bridge disappeared in the distance. No one spoke a word on the way home. They were too afraid. The next morning, when they checked the car, the windows were clean. No water, no prints, nothing, as if it had never happened. But a week later, another group went to the bridge. They didn't find the crying woman. They didn't hear footsteps. What they found were handprints, pressed deep into the steel railing of the bridge. Still wet, still dripping, as if something was waiting for them. Subscribe to English Speaking Tree for more terrifying stories that improve your English while giving you nightmares. Because sometimes the scariest voices are the ones asking for help.